So welcome to the Way of Reading live stream session 216. Yes, we have done over 200 sessions in the past 2 years. And together we have read over 200 linguistic papers online. I think that's quite an achievement. I'm very proud of that. And today is a special session. As you can see on the screen, we are joined by Professor Diane Larsen-Freeman, who is a pioneer in applied linguistics. Her work has reshaped how we understand grammar, language teaching, and second language acquisition. Now we're going to read her groundbreaking article. It's an integration of chaos and complexity theory into SLA studies. And this article invites us to rethink language as a system, not as a fixed system, but as an evolving, dynamic, and adaptive process. So what makes this session different is the format. And as you are familiar with, many of you have participated in live stream before, and we usually conduct live streams in 2 ways. It is either B, explaining someone else's paper, or the author themselves presents the paper directly. But today, we're doing something new. I will guide us through Professor Larsen-Freeman's 1997 article, Chaos, Complexity Science, and Second Language Acquisition. So as you can see on the screen, I will explain the ideas in my own words, raising questions along the way, and Professor Larsen-Freeman can jump in at any point if she finds it necessary to correct me or to clarify, to expand, or to reflect on something. So in other words, this will be a hybrid of guided reading and live interview, a dialogue across perspectives, and centered around one of the most influential and thought-provoking papers in the field. Professor Larsen-Freeman, we are so honored to have you with us today in this live stream. Would you like to say something to the audience before we start reading?
I would indeed. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Dr. Chen, you're very innovative, I must say.
Thank you.
I've been on many Zoom calls, but I've never been on one where I'm going to have the honor of listening to you interpret my ideas. My ideas, mind you, of over 30 years ago. I was thinking as I was preparing for this morning, we all should have to read something we wrote 30 years ago and see what we think about it today. But in any case, it's a pleasure to be with you, and congratulations on a very successful run you've had. Over 200 papers read. That's fabulous. Good for you.
Thank you so much. Before the reading, please allow me several minutes for sharing some of the wonderful memories that I have that are related to Professor Larsen-Freeman here. And Professor Larsen-Freeman and I first met in person in 2018 at a conference held in Macau. But because of our shared interest in the application of cognitive linguistic theories to SLA studies, we found each other in the same presentation quite a few times, and we talked. As I remember, Professor Larsen-Freeman, you told me during one of the conversations that cognitive linguistic theories could be considered a sub-branch of complex dynamic system theory, a sub-branch in linguistics, which I completely agree with. And then we met again at AAAL held in Denver this March in a Meet the Author event for this book. Can you see the book, everybody? So the book I'm holding right now in front of the camera is a unique one because, by the way, this book is a collection of 15 articles from 15 well-known linguists sharing their experience in teaching and researching linguistics. So this book is unique because it got 7 signatures from 7 of the 15 authors. Could you see in the middle, on this page, in the middle of this page, the largest one is a signature from none other than Professor Larsen-Freeman. This book
The largest
now
one.
is a treasure to me. It's so precious to me that I will not exchange it for anything, no matter how much people offer me. And there's an interesting story behind, me getting this book. Now, this book was provided as a special gift, for the event to a lucky winner. But of course, now you know who is the lucky winner now. But at that time, this was determined purely by chance because the book was hidden under one of the chairs in the room. The only fate can decide who could get this book. But guess what? Fate favored me that day. I entered the room and I went straight to the chair where the book, under which the book was hidden. But now I'm recording this, I remember that one of the hosts looked at me in a very strange way when I was about to sit on the chair. I didn't pay much attention, but now I understand why. So this is how I got this book. And we spent the past 3 sessions of this live stream reading chapter 4 of this book. Chapter 4 was written by Professor Larsen-Freeman, and it is a very thought-provoking chapter, and there are many sentences. I find it's very touching, and I actually made several videos sharing my thoughts after read this chapter. So I will begin with a few questions to Professor Larsen-Freeman. One of the questions is related to this chapter. So on page 43 of this book, Professor Larsen-Freeman mentioned, then, quite by chance, I began reading James Gleick's 1987 book, Chaos, Making a New Science. So this is a book that starts this idea of treating language and language learning as a complex system. So I'm curious, what made a linguist interested in a theory in science, in physics and mathematics? So Professor Larsen-Freeman, could you share with us under what circumstances you came across this book? I believe all the audience will be very interested in the story behind this revolutionary article.
Well, thank you for the question. Just as you mentioned, there's something about fate, perhaps. But in my case, it was the fact that I was attending with my family, visiting the Boston Museum of Science, which is a wonderful, wonderful science museum. And my children and my husband were lagging. I went ahead to the bookstore. And I was just perusing books because I love bookstores, as I'm sure many of you do. And I found myself in the physics section, and that's not probably a place that I would normally gravitate to. But again, I had some time, so I was just scanning the titles. And a gentleman, I do not know to this day who it was, but a gentleman reached behind me and pulled a book from the shelf. It was James Gleick's book, and he handed it to me, and he said, "Here, you would enjoy reading this, or you would appreciate reading this," something like that. Well,
Wow.
it was very surprising to me. I'm not sure what you would do, Dr. Chen, but I bought the book. I bought the book, I have to say.
I think I would do the same.
I also have to say that it stayed on my bedside table, as many of my books do, for a while. I didn't open it immediately. But when I did, I found on page 24, I'll never forget it,
Yes, you
a
wrote it
sentence,
here in this chapter too.
right?
Yeah.
In a nonlinear system, the act of playing the game as a way of changing the rules. Now, to
Yes.
be clear, Gleick is not a linguist. There's very little about language in the book. And he wasn't talking about linguistic rules, therefore. But the act of doing something has a way of changing the system, essentially. And
Yes,
that
that's
just
an
struck me.
important
That was
idea.
really important to me. And that set me to studying complex systems. But let me just say one more thing.
Yeah, please.
That, reading that quote or reading anything, coming across anything, You don't
Yes.
necessarily have a revelation as I did this time. You have to be, shall we say, ready, maybe open to learning or
Mm,
to something new. And let me just
mm,
briefly say what I was thinking at the time. I was a
mm-hmm,
bit I was a bit puzzled, frankly, because I had been trained during the cognitive revolution to
mm-hmm,
see language as a bounded, rule-governed system, an innate system. And yet,
mm,
research in second language acquisition began, and I believed in it. I mean, that was what I had been trained in. My
mm-hmm,
research began by looking at, and I contributed to some of this, looking at the morpheme, what they called acquisition orders. I prefer to call it morpheme accuracy order because most of the
mm-hmm.
is cross-sectional. In any case,
Yes.
I found in an explanation for the order, I found a correlation, not a causation, but a correlation between the accuracy order and the frequency with which the morphemes were used
Mm-hmm,
by speakers of the language, the so-called target language. And I went, oh, that's interesting because that suggests a frequency effect. It's not a pure frequency effect. There are things that affect the order as well, but there's a strong correlation. Isn't that interesting? That suggests that it's not necessarily something innate, but maybe something in the input that
mm-hmm.
makes for the order. Now, I've changed some of that language. I don't use the word input anymore, but that was the thought. So what did
Yes.
frequency really tell us? So that was one thought I had. Second thought I had was that since the inception of the modern day study of second language acquisition, there'd been a division, a bifurcation. Some of us
Mm-hmm,
were interested in the language acquisition process. Um,
mm-hmm,
the morpheme acquisition studies, for example, one example of that. Others of us were studying language learner, excuse me, language
mm,
learners, specifically um, language learner differences with the
mm-hmm.
idea that we would try to explain differential success. Why was it that some learners were more successful than others? So there was a bifurcation, learning and learners. And in the
Mm-hmm.
learners category, we had, I think I say it in this article actually, in 1976, there were 4 factors that were identified: motivation, attitudes,
Yes. It's a very
and
popular one, motivation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then some 20 years later, I don't know, 10 years later, 1989, with Bernard Spolsky's book, there were 74 learner
Wow.
factors.
Yes, you
And
mentioned
now
it
there
in
are
this article.
hundreds. Yeah.
It
But not
starts from
only,
4 and then expands to 74. It's
and now
quite a
hundreds,
growth.
and now hundreds, Dr. Chen. And not only that, but each one can be multi-leveled, right? So if you think of
Yes.
attitudes, what do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
attitudes? Is it the attitudes of the learners towards the speakers of the language they're studying? Is it the
Mm-hmm.
attitude of the speakers of the language they're studying towards the learners? Is it the attitudes of the learners towards the teacher or the teacher towards the learner? Or if it's a child, is it the attitudes of the parents to the teacher to the learning? So
Yes.
each one of them can be quite complicated. And so that bothered me, the separation between the two and the ever-growing list. I thought we'll never get. It's very reductionist. We'll never get to understanding, unraveling the mysteries of second language acquisition. And if you'll permit me, just one further place
No,
that I was
no,
in. And
that's how we do this.
okay,
This is
so
exactly
one
how we
further
do this.
place that I was in that was troubling to me
Uh-huh.
was that at the time there were calls for ceasing the teaching of grammar. No longer should you be teaching grammar.
It's still debatable until these days.
Well, it isn't in
Uh,
my mind. I stuck
mhm,
to it. I got some trouble and trouble for sticking to it. But I reasoned that the lack of grammar led
mhm,
to, I used Alfred North Whitehead's term, the inert knowledge problem. You know, we teach grammar as a set of rules, but
mhm,
students can't use them in
mm.
to say like to use language meaningfully in the way they want or position themselves in the way they want.
But
So
I think
I,
we still do this in China. We still
well, it happens.
teach grammar
Yeah.
as rules, and
Yes.
some of them are not even necessarily the correct rules. Some of the rules are
Yes.
even wrong.
Well, and because language is a dynamic system, the rules change. You know, I have
Yeah.
I'm co-author of a grammar book for teachers. I have 3 editions. Each one has gotten larger. And I could name you right now,
Mm-hmm.
if I stopped and thought about it, probably
Mm-hmm.
20 rules of English, pedagogical rules of English grammar that have changed over the course of those 3 editions of the books.
Okay, that must
So,
be very interesting. Could you give us like 1 or 2 examples? What
oh, okay.
pedagogical grammars
Okay,
have changed?
okay. We're not we're not even into the article, but sure. Let me think. Well, there's a rule in English that says if you have a monosyllabic adjective, a one-syllable adjective,
Uh-huh.
you want to compare it, you want to put it into the comparative, you add er,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
big, bigger, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Monosyllabic adjective big, you add the er suffix,
Mm-hmm.
the theme, to make it comparative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but more and more these days, oh, sorry, and if it's multisyllabic, bisyllabic or multisyllabic,
You
it's a
add
little
more
complicated, but
before
if it's
the word.
multisyllabic, you use more, so more
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. Um, if it's bisyllabic, it's a little trickier. But anyway, that's basically the rule. Monosyllabic er, polysyllabic, multisyllabic, you add more.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, if you listen to English speakers using
Mm-hmm.
English, particularly in a persuasive way, like an advertisement or commercial, you'll hear
Mm-hmm.
things like, this detergent, this laundry detergent will get your wash more white than any other detergent on the market. More white, not
Mm-hmm.
whiter.
Interesting.
Um,
No,
yeah. And
I didn't know because I have never, heard anyone saying this because I haven't watching a movie for a very long time.
right, right. Well, you would, not everybody will do it, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an example of rules changing. And I think there's a good reason for it. There's motivated reason for it, which is that especially with something like an advertisement,
Uh-huh.
you can emphasize, right, by stressing more. I can't say
So using
whiter.
more is a way of emphasizing instead of just
Yes.
as a comparative form.
Yes. But
Wow.
if you listen, I think you'll see, that's just one example. I think
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that. I mean, another example is the use of the reflexive pronoun, right?
Uh-huh.
I
To
may
to to
mention that
avoid the gender, the
yeah.
bias, right?
And even native speakers are
And
feeling
also
insecure
avoid
about
the using of the objective way and the subjective way of
that's
referring to
right.
somebody.
That's right.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
because
mentioned it in the paper too. So that
oh, I
happened
did. Okay.
in 1997 already.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that people get very insecure about that. Do I say
Uh,
I or do I say me? So they
mhm,
resolve the
mhm,
difference
mhm.
and use the
Yeah.
reflexive. So I
Yeah,
say
many
between
English
Dr. Chen
learners
and
in
me,
China.
between Dr. Chen and myself, we'll do this
Hmm.
presentation. So anyway, there's an example. But I felt that, that grammar teaching was misconstrued as just the teaching of rules. And therefore it led to the inert knowledge problem. And if we could teach grammar in a more active, a more dynamic way. And I coined the term
Mm,
grammaring, ing, because
mm, mm.
the ing
It's
suffix,
in the
of course,
chapter two,
has
grammaring.
to do with process. So
Hmm.
anyway, those were my thoughts when I encountered the Glake book. My point is that there probably are wonderful discoveries to be made every day, but you have to
Yes.
more or less be ready to see
Hmm.
them, to see
Yes.
them.
We need to treat ourselves as a complex system, be open and adaptive.
Yes, yes, good.
Well, since we're on this subject, I want to take this chance to ask a question. Does the rule of the number agreement for the there be structure still hold? Like
Well, yeah,
there is one chair and the 2 tables in the room,
yeah,
and there
yeah.
are 2 tables and one chair in the room.
Yeah,
Does
that's
this
another
rule
example.
still exist?
Yes, it does. That's another example. I mean, rules don't necessarily just disappear overnight, right? But that's another example of what I would say is a change. Because if you say there are, yes, usually you follow with a plural, following the
Mm-hmm.
verb to be usually,
Mm-hmm.
having to do with information
Mm-hmm.
distribution in the sentence, and the fact that we put new information in the predicate. But if you contract the there and make it
Mm-hmm.
theirs, THERE apostrophe S, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people will use that monomorphemically and they'll say there's a lot of people, especially with a lot, because you have the indefinite article. There's a lot of people in this room rather than there are a lot of people in this room. So with theirs, often people will follow it with a plural, even though it's there is in an uncontracted form. So that's another example. I would say the rule still holds, but it's changing. It's
Yeah, it's when I was learning English, it was called the proximity rule. So
yes,
the number agreement is between the closest noun to the be verb.
that's right.
But I just not long ago I checked the corpus of contemporary American English. Now before a singular noun, now the plural form of be and the singular form of be now is half-half.
Yes.
So I think maybe in some near future, the plural form of be will completely replace the singular form. Maybe it's developed towards that direction, I guess. So I think
Yeah.
it's
Well,
changing.
we can
This
predict.
rule is changing too.
We can never make a firm prediction because it's a complex system. But we can
Yes.
certainly say that it changes. The act of playing the game has a way of changing the rules. And if you think of playing the game as using the language meaningfully, right?
Yes.
That's how I interpret playing the game.
Hmm.
Then of course that does lead to change. Yes, good for you for observing that.
Thank you. So now I'm going to read this article, and I got one more question before the reading. So what aspects of this article you want us to pay special attention to when reading it, and why?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in here. I went back and read it myself. I thought, oh, poor Dr. Chen. There's a lot here.
Yes.
Um, well, just I think to make it simple, I think it's now been used, these ideas have
Hmm.
now been used in
Hmm.
something called complex dynamic systems
Hmm.
theory. And
Hmm.
so I'd like you to pay attention to what does complex mean? What does dynamic mean? What does
Mm.
systems mean within the theory? That's all embedded in this
Mm.
article, but this was the initial article, right? And by the way, this
Hmm.
article was based on a talk that I gave at a second language research forum in Montreal in 1994. And then I later published in 1997. So it's actually older than 30 years. But in any case, you know, complex doesn't mean complicated. There are complicated
Mm.
systems like car engines, but if you take
Hmm.
a car engine apart, you can put it back together again. Or if there's
Yes.
something wrong with the car engine, you can go to your mechanic and they can replace the spark plugs. But
Hmm.
complex, you can't take something apart because the parts are all interconnected, and
Hmm.
out of the system arises what's called emerges something
Yes.
new.
Hmm.
It can't be brought apart. So understand complex is different from complicated. And one of the problems with the
Uh,
theory is sometimes the words we use have a meaning in common parlance that is
hmm.
different from the meaning in the theory. So just remembering
Yes.
complex
It's
doesn't
very
mean
important
complicated.
to remember
Yeah.
this.
And
Because
then could I just say one more thing? The dynamic part is
no problem.
important too,
Mm.
because the dynamic, as I say in the article, actually, there are three meanings to dynamic. One is that
Hmm.
where language is dynamic now. I'm only
Hmm.
too aware, as you are, of time passing as we speak. So that's a dynamic, a synchronic process. Then
Hmm.
dynamic or change, I should say change, also occurs over time. The language we're using now is not the same as the English of Shakespeare, or certainly more
Hmm.
recently. I just gave you some examples of grammar rules changing. Um, but then the third meaning, what's the third meaning of change or dynamism? And that's the one I think is so intriguing. And that is,
Yes, I'll pay special attention to that because I
okay, you
remember
do that.
there's a
You
part in
do
the
that.
article. So you mentioned three meanings of
Yeah. I'll let you do
dynamic, and
that. And then the
two of
system is
two of the
important too,
meanings are
understanding.
already exist in linguistics, but the third one
Yeah,
is new. It's from
yeah,
the
exactly.
complexity science.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yes, you read it well. The last one is just systems. What's a
Hmm.
system? It's a
Hmm.
set collection of things that accomplish something like a car engine, for example.
Hmm.
But as I said, a complex system is different because the parts are interconnected, like the human brain. They're
Hmm.
interconnected, and things emerge from them,
Hmm.
and they're context dependent. And that's important
Hmm.
also, context
Hmm.
dependence. And context doesn't just mean the space, it also means temporality, the time at which the system arises. So I think it's important to understand what a system is. Systems research, by the way, is commonplace now. We understand a lot of things in systems. And this theory really is an ecological theory because it very much mirrors the ecosystem we live in. And that's another story, I guess. But I'm very fond of nature. It's not surprising that I'd be attracted to a theory that fits so well with the natural world.
Yes. Ever since we met in 2018, I began to be very interested in the complexity theory, and I actually took some online course on complex science. And through this course, I understood that for a system as complicated as a rocket or the car example you just mentioned, you can actually predict what would happen if you do something. You step on a brake, what will happen? You press this button, what will happen? It's predictable. But for a complex system, as we will see soon in the article, it's almost impossible to predict what would happen, next. Even
That's
a
right.
very small change at one point would, lead to huge, unpredictable results in the future.
That's
People
right.
describe this with the butterfly effect. This is a very well-known metaphor.
That's right. And, some people are very uncomfortable with the idea of you can't predict. But if you can't predict, you can't control either. So I think it's
Yes,
important to
this
understand
is
that
one of
we
the
often,
question I want to
oh,
ask
sorry.
after the reading, because
Okay,
we can't
I'm
predict
jumping ahead.
what teachers should do to help students. With teachers, we need to be able to tweak something to make an influence to the outcome. But if they are, what we do and the outcome is unpredictable, the link between these two things are too random, what should a teacher do? I will ask this later after reading this article.
Yeah, well, I have an answer for that too. But okay, let's we keep having this
Okay.
preliminary discussion. Let's look at the article,
Oh,
okay?
I think it's wonderful because we're still reading this article, but just in a different way. So I will start by reading the abstract together, and then I will move on to the structure of this article. And after that, I have prepared quite a few extra materials to facilitate our reading, as I will show you some of you here, and have made some cheat books. I have also made an interactive exercise book for you. So here I list all the features of a complex dynamic system, but I only displays the definition and examples from other fields. I deliberately leave these two parts empty for you to fill. So you can use this interactive exercise book in at least two ways. One way is that you try filling the blank before you read the article based on your current understanding of language and language learning, and also based on the definition of these features. You say why language as a system is also complex, because if you could find an example, that would even be better. The other way of using this exercise book, I will send this interactive web page to all of you in a group chat. So the other way is you fill in the blank while reading the article. You find the answers in the article and fill it. You can save the process here. There's a button to save the progress. So I have already typed in something here. So I have finished 1 out of 24 blank. So I got a 4% progress. So anyway, so that's how we will read this book. So Professor Larsen-Freeman, one of the features of our program is the extensive use of AI tools. Now, we read articles with the assistance of large language models. We will use quite a few AI tools. In today's session, we will use at least 3. You see, it's very interesting that a large language model, especially the generative language model, it itself is a complex system. So its wonderful ability emerge. Just we still don't know how it got its ability, but it just emerged when the number of parameters exceeds a certain threshold. Just wonderful things happens. So I think it's very relevant that we use a complex system to help us understand an article about complex system and its application in linguistic studies.
Good point.
So,
good point. Yes, of course, AI was not known when I wrote this article, but I certainly agree with you in terms of the connection. Yes.
So let's start with the abstracts. There are many striking similarities between the new science of chaos, complexity, and second language acquisition. Chaos complexity scientists study complex non-linear system. They are interested in how disorder gives way to order, of how complexity arises in nature. So this sets the background of this study. To some physicists, chaos is a science of process rather than state, of becoming rather than being. It will be argued that the study of dynamic, complex, nonlinear system is meaningful in SOA as well. Although the new science of chaos complexity has been hailed as a major breakthrough in the physical sciences, some believe its impact on the more human disciplines will be as immense. This belief will be affirmed by demonstrating how the study of complex nonlinear systems casts several enduring SOA conundrums in a new light. So from this abstract, I believe we could already get a general idea of what this article will be about. At least, three things will be discussed. First, then the author will introduce the major features of a complex system, and then she will compare language and language learning to a complex system to make the point that they are also complex systems. So there will be a mapping of language and the language learning on the features of those complex systems. So that, I think, would be the things that we want to pay close attention to. Now let's look at the structure of the article. Usually we can find the structure at the end of the introduction, but I must say not every journal articles will have this part. But fortunately for us, this article has this part at the end of the introduction. Let's read this part together so that we know how the article is structured. And the purpose of the article is to call attention to the similarities among complex non-linear systems occurring in nature and language acquisition. While this value of analogy may only be metaphoric, sometimes you don't see something until you have the right metaphor to perceive it. Well, I like this quote very much. It is my hope that learning about the dynamics of complex nonlinear system will discourage reductionist explanations in matters concerned to second language acquisition researchers. So as you can see here, there will be a lot of contrasting concepts in this article, because this article set out to introduce a new perspective to language as opposed to some previous understanding of language. So there will be many contrasting concepts like nonlinear versus linear, and emergent versus reductionist. So because of this, I also made a cheat sheet for you, which documented all the contrast. Now, here I go. I also want to show Professor Larsen-Freeman what we did previously. Here on this screen, we use Zotero to manage all the articles we read in the previous sessions. So all the articles are here. There's over 200 articles that we have read. So this is a shared group. It's a shared literature group. So for every article, but only recently I started to number them. I was stupid before I didn't number them, but you can see these are the recent
You didn't
articles we
expect
read.
this many.
And
Yeah.
for every article, and I provide some attachments. So this, including this article, of course, and also I will try providing some extra materials based on this article. And here I had a cheat sheet. Which one is a dynamic system theory? Let me see, complex. Let me open it here. It could take several seconds. Which one? What is this one? This one is for the last session. This is how complex theory could help, cast a new lights on some existing problems in SLA. These are 5. I think it would be, if it's not this one, it should be this one. I collect like over 12 or 15 contrasting concepts, pairs of concepts. And I also made a literature review of the development of complex theory in SLA, and to complement the articles we're reading. It's not this one. I can't get the right one. I can't see the full name. Business science, second language. Just please forgive me. I might take 1 minute more. Okay. I really want to show you this, and I really want to show Professor. This is the one we have already opened. Then if it's not this one, it must be this one. Okay. I hope I got this right this time. Okay. So Professor Larsen-Freeman mentioned in this article many contrasting concepts like linear versus nonlinear, but of course she does not make explicit contrast between these concepts, but you can see this in between the line, linear versus nonlinear system. And I will share this with you so you can read this after you read or before you read the article. And status versus process, and reductionism versus holism or emergence, fixed point versus a string attractor. Fixed point refers to the end point of your learning in a previous view of language learning, and string attractor we will come across later. A closed versus open system, negative versus positive feedback. I think this one is not necessarily contrasting because it exists in both perspectives. Competence versus performance. This is a classic contrasting. I believe with complex system view, this distinction will not be necessary. In synchronic versus diachronic perspective, and top-down, bottom-down process, rule-based versus emergent, usage-based language, and so on, so forth. So this is what we can find in the article, and the structure of the article we just mentioned, where I will continue to read the rest of this paragraph. So to this aim, I will begin the article by describing features of complex nonlinear systems that chaos complexity scientists have identified. Next, I will demonstrate that these same features are characteristic of language and language acquisition. By way of illustrating the value of seeing language acquisition as a dynamic, complex, and non-linear process, I will then offer several examples of questions in SLA which might be addressed from this new perspective. And finally, I will conclude by making some personal observations on the implications of this perspective for development of the SLA field. So I think this is a very clear description of the structure of this article. It consists of at least 4 major parts. First, the description of the features of a dynamic system we will see soon. And second, why language as a system is also complex and dynamic and has all the features of a dynamic system, and why language learning could also be considered complex and dynamic and open and adaptive. And based on and in the last session, they also mentioned if we introduce this perspective into linguistic studies, what benefits could we gain from doing this? So this is already very clearly structured, but if you want to have even better representation of the structure, you could use an AI tool. It's Notebook LM. It's made by Google. So this will generate a mind map for you based on the article. So you don't have to do it yourself. I have looked at this. It's very accurate. See, there are 4 major parts we will come across. Features of complex nonlinear system. And if you click on this, you could see the sub-branches. So this tool is called Notebook LM. It's made by Google if you don't know, but if you participated in our programs previously, and because I have introduced this many times. And I show this because I want to show Professor Larsen-Freeman how I got this idea. The format that we are using today is actually from this. So in addition
Dr.
to
Chen, you are amazing. You're amazing. You make me feel very humble, considering that I've written one article when you've created all these tools and done all this work to support
you inspired me to do this. You got me interested in this theory, and
well, I'm happy that I did.
This tool, in addition to provide you with a mind map, it also generates a podcast style audio file for you in which 2 people are discussing this article. I'll play this audio for like half a minute so you get a feel of this. Professor Larsen-Freeman, this audio is generated automatically by AI based on the article. So I find this fascinating, and I feel that it is even more interesting if we read articles by this style, this back and forth discussion, instead of just one person leading the read. So that's where I got this idea for the format of today's session.
Now I understand. Yeah, good.
So let's get back to the
very much
article.
in keeping with complexity theory anyway. The interactivity is very much in keeping with it, yes.
Yes, and for this article, it generates an audio of 26 minutes, I think, because usually you only generate an audio of like 8 to 15 minutes, but this time it got 26.
I'm not surprised.
How complex this article is.
I'm not surprised.
It's
You're
a difficult
brave
article.
to tackle it.
Even AI finds it difficult. It needs more time to explain it. Okay, let's move on to
it will learn.
So now I will jump to I will use this cheat sheet, this one, to explain this. Why? So the features of the 12 features, Professor Larsen-Freeman listed 12 features of a complex system, and we will look at them one by one. So a complex dynamic system, of course, is dynamic. So dynamic means they are always changing. Okay, so they are defined by movement, not by status. So this is what dynamic means for a complex system. And also here is one example, like the brain is plastic. So our brain is made up hundreds of billions of neurons connecting to each other. And when we learn things, these neurons actually they change biologically, not only by connection. It change actually. It experience some physical changes in the cells. So this is what dynamic means. A complex system is dynamic, and of course, a complex system is complex. Complex means that it's made up of interacting components that influence each other in non-trivial ways. And their mutual influence is very, I have to use the word complex, that you cannot predict. Actually, it's not true. You can actually calculate. What makes the complex system unpredictable is that you cannot measure precisely the initial state, or you either never know the initial condition, or your measurements will bound to have some errors. So there's no measurements that could measure without any error. But the characteristic of a complex system is that when time passes, the error will grow exponentially, and eventually the observed outcome will be vastly deviating from your prediction. That is
Yes,
what makes a complex
because
unpredictable.
it's an open system,
Yes.
open to energy or information or other agents. Because it's open, things get in, ideas, things get introduced. That's also that's also the problem of predictability, right? You can't anticipate
Yes.
all of the input to the system because things get introduced. It's an open system. It doesn't close down. It's not,
Yes. Yes.
I'll stop
I think
there.
a classical example of a complex system is the three bodies. There's a Chinese sci-fi science fiction written by a Chinese author. It's called the Three Body Systems, which describe three suns in a system. Three suns, they move around each other, and because they're complex interaction with each other, so their orbiting trees is not predictable. And there is a planet near these three suns. So people living on the planet, they always live in hell because this unpredictability of how these suns orbiting. But underlies their complex moving behavior is actually the gravitational rule. The gravitational rule also applies. It's just because their interaction is too complicated, so you cannot predict them. So I think that's what complex mean. And now then we move on to nonlinear. Nonlinear means that the change does not happen in proportional fashion. The change may happen disproportionately. At one point, the change would be very large, and at some other points, you may plateau or it show no change at all for a very long time. So, and also it also means small causes may lead to disproportionately large effect. I think Professor Larsen-Freeman used this example. Avalanche occurs when a small snow shift triggers a massive collapse, but you will never know which, which snowflake caused the final collapse.
I think I
And the
used the word
scientists,
pebble, but anyway,
yeah, the
the
pebble,
pebble is
okay,
going to roll and unleash that avalanche. Mind
yeah.
you, there's some pent-up energy in the avalanche potential, right? But
Yes, it's already
so
built
something
up
has happened,
inside.
but we don't know when it'll be necessary. I mean, the conditions have to be such, having to do with temperature and all that, but it's still that last little pebble that rolls down the hillside that unleashes in a great convulsion the massive amount of snow that has been built up. Yes.
Yeah, I once read an article about how, a pile of sand collapsed. When the
Yes.
scientists they began
Herr
to
Bach.
drip the sand, they drip the sand slowly onto the top of the sand pile, and they want to observe when and how the sand will collapse. And this is also a complex system. You can never
It
predict
is.
which
It is.
which small piece of sand that caused the final collapse. So
That's
that's
right.
very, very interesting, nonlinear.
Yes.
Mm. And
That's a
I think this
paradox.
also has some implication to lives too. So you just make efforts and given enough time, the miracle will happen. And you just don't know when. You have to keep making effort.
Keep trying.
Keep trying, yes. So it's chaotic. So periods of unpredictability and the instability are built into CDS behavior. I think these four concepts are related. And chaotic because it's unpredictable, so it's chaotic. And like weather patterns are chaotic. And also, please remember that the chaotic does not mean it could change, at will. It change without any, complete randomness. It does not mean that. Even I remember Professor Larsen-Freeman mentioned that the weather is chaotic, but it also changes within the limit. So here, a sunny day may turn stormy without clear prior indicators, but a sunny day, it's very improbable that a sunny day will turn suddenly into a minus 50-degree winter.
Yes. So if I
there's
may
a limit.
interrupt just for a moment here, your listeners and readers may be wondering, well, you just said, I said, there's predictability is difficult, but don't we use weather forecasts all the time? Aren't they based on predictability?
Yes.
But notice that weather forecasts are, first of all, they're not totally accurate, but if they're accurate at all, they're only accurate within a very short period of time, right? If you go to a weather software, for instance, they will only predict, maximum. Well, they'll make predictions, but the only one that is actually accurate is the very proximate next day. And even that can be subject to change, right? So I just wanted to correct that, or not correct, but people might be saying, yeah, but weather forecasting is predictive. Yes, but within limits, because there is, because of the small changes that can affect the outcome.
Yes, please do interrupt me anytime you find it necessary. This is exactly what we want to do in this format. So I made mistakes all the time, so I'm not 100 sure whether my understanding is correct, but we want to help the participants understand the paper better in this way. Thank you very much. And I'll continue with the fourth features. It's unpredictable. So the specific future states of a complex dynamic system cannot be precisely predicted. Okay, so one example is the market fluctuates in unpredictable ways, and
Yes.
you can never predict. But people try it. Many people want to do this because they want to make money,
And they lose it.
People, yeah, the people who do this always end up losing their money. So don't fight against nature. This is nature's law. Yeah. So learning linguistics could help you, save some money, at least not losing some. Number 6, it's sensitive to initial condition. This is also one of the points that puzzle me the most. And so early conditions shape long-term system behavior dramatically. That means where you start has a very large influence on where you end. But even though the process is, unpredictable, it's chaos. So by analogy to language learning, there are many factors that could be considered as initial conditions for language learning. For example, individual differences and the learner's social economic status and many other things, just like Professor Larsen-Freeman mentioned in the beginning of this program, this session, there are more than 100 variables that could affect, the outcome of language learning. So
that's why learning trajectories are very different from one individual to the next. There are, of course, some similarities across them, but if you look over time and you trace the developing language resources of a learner, you'll see of learners, you'll see that the actual trajectory, the actual line of development, is very different. I'm now thinking about subject-verb agreement here. It's very different from one learner to the next. Yes.
A frequent cited example for the sensitivity of a complex system to initial condition is the very well-known butterfly effect. So once a butterfly and flying its wings in North America, and it probably would cause a hurricane in Asia. I don't remember exactly the continents, but you get the idea.
Yes.
So it's a 6 features and it's open. So you always get input from outside, If it's not open, it will eventually go into a state with a complete, more quiet
Entropy. Entropy. Yes.
entropy. Yeah. So a complex dynamic system interact with the environment and exchange energy, information, or input. So, for example, cells exchange nutrients with their environment, and every living being is a complex system. We constantly, absorb energy from our environment, and we also output some, material or energy into the environment. So that's why, for a closed system without any energy from outside, it will go to complete chaos. One example that people use is if you don't clean your room will become more and more chaotic. So yeah, it become dirtier.
That sounds like a parent. Yes.
Yeah, so a complex system is always open. It's not a closed system, and this has a huge ramification for language. For language learning, we could easily understand why it's open because we need to get input from teachers, from the environment. But language as a system itself is open. It probably more difficult to digest. But just as we talked about at the beginning, the openness of a language allows for change even in grammatical rules.
New
So
forms are being
new
created all
forms
the
of being
time.
created all the yes, yeah, and
I mean, you have a new innovation, AI, for example. There's a whole
yes,
new lexicon that comes along, but not, as I
mhm.
said before, not just lexicon. It also has to do with grammar changing.
Yes, I once read an article written by two researchers also from Google. They work in the project, the Google Book project, and they created a online program called Ngram Viewer. So
Yeah.
they studied the change of English in the past 1,000 years, and they found that initially all the verbs are irregular verb. So they change into the past tense. All the verbs are irregular. But along with the time, most of the verb become regular verb. So you could simply add an ed or d after the verb to form a past tense. Only those that are very frequently used, they keep their irregular form for past tenses.
They're the fossils in the language.
Yes,
Yes.
this is very interesting. And also frequency play a very important role here. So all the irregular verbs that we know now, they are highly frequent verb, like take, have, teach. So these are
Yes.
very high frequency words. And all the other verbs, they lose their irregularity and they become, regular. And that article is very interesting. It actually predict, the half-life of the rest of the irregular verbs. Some of them are undergoing changes right now. For example, they use the example of wed. So wed currently has two forms for past tense. You could say wed, and you could also say wedded. But if you look at the car of a new couple when they're getting married, they always say newly wedded instead of newlywed. Okay, so this shows that properties giving enough time, this regular form will replace the irregular form. Another verb is also undergoing such, change. It's a very common verb, learned. So
Yes.
currently still we have there are two forms, past tense forms for learned. One is learned, it's irregular. You change the learned into learned. You add a t after learn. The other one is regular, learned. And
Yeah.
according to the authors of that article, eventually learned will become prevalent and learned
Yes.
will gradually disappear.
Because
So
participles are changing into tense, is basically what's happening.
yeah.
The present participle. I mean, as it is, and I'm sure you know this as a language learner, it's difficult when you're learning English to make a distinction between using the present perfect or the past. And so I think we're helping you now because the
Yeah.
present perfect is diminishing and the past is taking over. So we can say things like, I just learned something, whereas before just had to co-occur with the present perfect.
Yes, and this actually creates some difficulties for language teachers when
Yes.
explaining the functions of different tenses.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what they learned
It
when
does.
they were students no longer apply now.
Yeah, I tell you, it changes. It changes. Now, by the way, there are rules of
Hmm.
thumb that can be very
Hmm.
helpful to learners, the pedagogical rules of thumb. So we
Mm.
don't want to say that it's all, and languages do achieve some stability too. It's important to
Hmm.
say that as well,
Hmm.
because otherwise people might just surrender. They might just give up when we keep
Mm.
talking about language change and, regular and irregular and that, there is some stability to the system. I mean, I just said I
Hmm.
wrote, the last edition of the grammar book that Marianne Sels-Mercier and I co-authored has 1,000 pages, and a lot of it is about the regularities in language as well.
Mm. It will
So
take 100 sessions to read that book.
I don't recommend it. And after this article, you may not want to read anything that I've written.
No, I actually become more interested in this field. I'll definitely read more, and I believe many of the audiences will do the same too. So the eighth features of a complex system is a self-organizing, and order and structures can emerge internally without external command. Some typical example would be the flocking behavior in birds. I believe many of us have all seen how a flock of birds are flying in the sky. They form some shape, but actually they follow some simple rules. Some the rule just tells them you stay close to the one left to the left of to your left side, and you keep certain distance from them. So those simple rules, but when a huge number of individuals are doing the same thing, and as a whole, they exhibit some kind of pattern. That's what you say the different shapes of birds flying in the sky. It's very fascinating. I actually saw once in Paris, I remember. Uh, so each bird follows simple local rules, resulting in a coherent flock. I have one question here, Professor Larsen-Freeman.
Oh.
So for these features in other fields, the individuals are, they are the same thing. They are, the same types of entity that follow the same simple rules. But it seems to me that this does not apply to language because later, please forgive me, I have to jump to the point later. Because later in this article, you said a language as a system consisting of subsystems. So those subsystems like morpheme systems, and phonetic systems, semantic systems, or even pragmatic systems, are these systems the the individuals here? Analogy to the birds in this example, or it is the other unit of analysis that is the individuals in the example.
Um,
Um, do
yes,
I do I
yes, they
do I
can
answer the
be.
question clearly?
But I think maybe there's maybe a little bit of confusion that I've contributed to here. Because when we say each bird follows simple local rules, you might say, but wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a challenge here to a rule-governed
Mm-hmm.
system, right? So what is this rule stuff? But the rules here are referring to Craig Boyd's, the computer
Mm-hmm.
rules that the
Mm-hmm.
computer coder writes in order to simulate bird flocking behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not suggesting that the birds have rules that are innate in their heads. That's not what it's saying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helps at all, but yes, they're fantastic. I gave a talk once, AAAL plenary, where I showed video of the starlings in England, and they're just fantastic. You really should if you haven't done that, go to YouTube and look at the starling videos
Mm-hmm.
on how they manage to flock and create this great superorganism and different shapes beyond that of the individual birds. And what I'm saying here is that this is actually true in language itself, that it's self-organizing. There's no Chomskyan linguist that says this is the way language is going to be. It evolves over time without having a central dictator saying, we try. Sometimes we try to engineer language. We try to say, okay, there are academies around the world that try to say, this is the way you should speak. This is the way you should write. But they're never successful. It's what they call shoveling sand against the tide. So we don't want to be confused by the rules here. These are computer rules, but not rules in language. And yes, the subsystems interact as well. Absolutely. They are very much part of the whole.
Actually, by reading this article, I got a deeper understanding why Chomsky proposed the LAD, the language acquisition device, why he found it necessary for human to have this innate faculty in our brain. Because if you presuppose that, from a complex system perspective, so the pattern could emerge from the simple interactions between the subsystems. So your output, the learning outcome, could be more complex than the input. That's possible from a complex system perspective. But if you do not hold, this idea, then you would observe that the input is positive according to what Chomsky would say. The positive of input is actually a important assumption of generative transformative grammar. So, but the output is much more complex than the input. So I think that's why Chomsky proposed that there must be something else to ensure that you could produce more complex outputs based on very poor input. So, and
Yes,
that's
the poverty of the stimulus is what he called it, right?
yes,
The poverty of the stimulus.
the poverty of
But
stimulus.
this theory contradicts that. It says, yes, exactly what you
Yes,
just said,
yes,
Dr. Chen, that you can get more complexity because it's self-organizing. You
yes.
get more complexity out of simplicity. You don't have to have you don't have to
LAD.
you don't have to have preformationism. You don't have to have a plan. This happens naturally. Just
Yes,
as
so for a self-organizing system, and it could generate complex patterns just within itself. It's not
yes,
necessary to presuppose the existence of a language acquisition device in our brain.
that's right. That's right. And don't forget that, of course, it's a system, but you're also interacting with others. What Lynn Cameron and I said in our 2008 book, there's a co-adaptation, right? So it's not that the system is in isolation. There's a lot of interaction
Yes,
that
yes,
occurs.
co-adaptation is very important, as you mentioned in the article. Otherwise, we cannot understand each other. We will
Yes,
each develop our own way of
that's
speaking,
right.
completely different from each other, but we
That's
don't.
right. That's right. That's right. So this is very much of a bottoms-up approach, that the patterns emerge out of the interactions in a non-directed way. But there's also the convergent restraints or constraints that are put on to assure intelligibility, because a language has a conventional shape, because there's a historicity to the system. And all of those factors constrain to keep the system from spiraling out of control and into unintelligibility among learners.
Okay, it's fascinating that you look at a system that is both stable and dynamic.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
language
Well,
is
I think
such
I
a
talk
system.
about persistent instability.
Yes, yes.
And one of the examples I like, this is sort of, I guess, too far-fetched, but one of the examples I like is children have to learn to be able to stand up, right? They pull themselves up and they hold on to bits of furniture and that sort of thing in order to get themselves stable. But you and I don't have to do that because we've learned to balance on our feet, even though we're constantly adjusting. I mean, in other words, the soles of our feet are very small when you consider the amount of body that they have to support on the earth, right? So we're constantly making micro adjustments to keep our balance.
Without even realizing it.
Yeah, and without realizing it, that's exactly right.
Mm.
So that's the persistent change, but it leads to some stability, because otherwise we would topple over, we would fall if we weren't making those micro adjustments to our posture.
That's what people call a dynamic balance. People love to use this
Yes.
word these days.
Yes, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
learning
very
all kinds of
interesting.
things.
So the lines feature is feedback sensitive. Complex system is very sensitive to feedback, and in nature, the feedback could be the survival pressure from the environment. In biology, it could be a natural selection. In other like for other beings, for example, amoeba. Have you heard of the mechanism of amoeba? They could form complex, you know, um, mapping of a route from where they are to the food, because uh, the things they will exert some kind of liquid, and these liquids they have some pressure, so that will push the liquids flow towards a certain direction, and usually the shortest direction from where they are to the food. So
Yes.
now scientists actually use this. They make a miniature of the landscape of a city, and then put those amoeba,
Yes.
a huge amount of amoeba on that miniature, on that model, and they just wait for a few hours, and it will automatically design the subway system for this city. It's
Yes,
very,
indeed.
very
The
efficient.
shortest, it
The
creates the
shortest
shortest
route.
route to
Yeah.
the source. That's
Mm.
right. Isn't that
Yes.
amazing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
could I
really.
just say one other thing maybe at this point would be useful? And that is that, if you're not a science file, and I think you are a science file lover, and I am as well, you might
Oh
say,
yeah,
well,
very much.
wait a second now, we're talking about humans here. Why are we talking about amoeba or cities or bird flocks? Well, of course, first of all, the bird flocking, for example, is a metaphor that helps us understand how things self-organize. But what I want to say that is that some people have said, okay, but this is a science theory, and we are interested, and from physics, and we are interested in human language use and learning and development. And my answer to that is, if you have a theory that explains both the physical world and the human world, it's a very powerful theory. First of all, that's my answer to that. And second of all, these examples from nature are trying to help us understand the human system, right? So it's not that we're divorced from it. We're not saying this is science, this is humans. In fact, this is a convergent theory. It looks to break down dichotomies. It looks for what is it that connects rather than what is it that distinguishes. So I just
In
want to put that
cognitive
in a little.
linguistics.
I want to just
So
put that a little aside. Also,
yes,
there's
that's very,
something
very
called
useful. And
that's important to recognize, as Edgar Morin, the French philosopher, has, a complexity theorist, has, that there's both restricted complexity and general complexity. And the restricted complexity is more physics and mathematical dynamical system kind of thing, whereas the general complexity is more biological and human and so let's say biological and social sciences oriented. And it's the biological social sciences part of complexity theory that I think is so useful to us as applied linguists and linguists. So we're not necessarily talking about physics. We're talking about the application of these ideas to something that's more germane to our own interests, i.e. language
yes.
development.
Because recently I heard a theory that a kind of prediction that this century is a century for complexity, complex system or complexity theory,
Yes.
because all the other systems have already been studied. There's not much left to do for for those systems. And now more and more complex system arises. They have been, they have displayed great potentials in many aspects of our lives. One example would be the large language model like GPT, Claude. So they are complex system, and their ability emerge from simple interaction between those parameters. So I
Yes.
think this is very relevant. This article, even it was published 30 years ago, it is very relevant to the current
Yes.
situation.
Do you know who said, do you recall, or did you ever see who
Okay,
said this is the
okay.
century of complexity?
I heard it from an online audio program, like a podcast program.
So
I
let me
listen
tell
to
you
that every
who
day.
said that. Let me tell you who said it.
Maybe
Stephen
he called
Stephen Hawking,
Stephen
a
Hawking.
very
I didn't know
famous,
that.
very
Okay.
very famous, unfortunately no longer with us, but Stephen Hawking. So there's an authority for you. Said this is the century of complexity. Yeah, he said it in 2000.
That's very reassuring for people who study cognitive linguistics, because
Yeah.
cognitive linguistics is a kind of complex theory. Oh, let's move on to the last three. And today we probably don't have time to cover the other part of the article. We will continue the talk in the next session. So please remember to join us in next session. And we usually broadcast from 8:30 to 10. So it's 1.5 hour. And usually we will leave 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. But here, please allow me a few more minutes, and let me finish the other three features of this article. And then I have some questions to Professor Larsen-Freeman. And after that, we still would leave 10 minutes for Q&A from the audiences. And you could ask your questions in the comment section, and I will read them to Professor Larsen-Freeman. And now I'll move to the 10th features of a complex system. It's adaptive. It means it adjusts to survive or optimize performance. In terms of a language, regarding languages, individuals like us, we also adapt our language use to be able to communicate with each other. Okay, that's what adaptive means. And quickly, it have a string attractor. This part is probably a little more difficult to understand. So by string attractor, it means that it developed towards a certain direction or under a influence of a certain pressure. So that's a string attractor. And Professor Larsen-Freeman gave the example of accents when learning a foreign language. And she mentioned that probably Spanish people who learn English will have different difficulties in pronunciation from Chinese who learn English. And that's their mother tongue, some features of their mother tongue would be string attractors to their language learning. For example, in Chinese, we all know that Chinese is not a time-stressed language. For us, we don't even have short vowels. Every vowel is long vowels. So we pronounce it each vowels within the same amount of time. So the time is fixed. So that's why many Chinese learners of English would find it difficult, to learn the rhythms of English. So English is a time-stressed language. The stressed vowels will be pronounced a little longer, like roughly twice the time of the short vowels. And those unaddressed syllables, they will be pronounced very quickly. And we even have some short forms for that. But Chinese does not have these features. So this is one of the difficult points for Chinese to speak English well. I have this problem, I know that. I cannot pronounce it the rhythms as accurately as I want to be. So
Your
that's
example
for
is
me.
your example is excellent, though, because that is what an attractor is, just simply a space in phase space. If we consider a topographical image just in space, it is just where a system tends to land, where it's not where it's attracted to, but where it achieves some stability. So the fact that Chinese differs is an example of a place in the total possible universe of languages. It's a space that it occupies. It's attracted to. Yes.
Okay. Finally, the last one, the fractal. Fractal is a mathematic terminology. That means that the systems they have similar shape at every level. And a typical example would be trees, So a tree is shaped like this, and if you look at the branch also shaped like this with sub branch. And then you look at the leaves. The leaves have also the same pattern of this, umbrella shape. Okay, so that's called a fractal. Fractal, like they mirror each other at a different level. So, but this part I find it difficult to understand how language is a fractal in shape.
Yeah. So may I interject something then?
Yeah.
Maybe this will help
Yes,
you.
please.
So I told you I'm interested in nature. I'm fascinated by nature. And the more I look around, I see fractals everywhere. But so the question you asked, though, is a good one. How is language a fractal? Well, I actually have I never wrote it up. I really should write my presentation up. I have lots of examples of how it is, but let me give you one of them.
Are they online? Those
No, I gave it in an ILA Congress some years ago. There are several things that I've given in oral presentations that I really should write up so that I could reach a wider audience. But anyway, just to give you a quick example of a fractal in language.
Or through this kind of live stream.
Yes, or through the live stream. I wasn't prepared for this, but let me tell you. So,
okay.
So if you look at an overall frequency count of words in, let's use English. So what is what's the most frequent? What's the most frequently occurring word in English language?
The.
That's right. Or the stress, THE. That's right. That's the most frequent. And the next, do you know what the next one is?
Next one is I. Or
no, it's of.
Of.
And anyway, it goes down,
the
right?
A of B, they tend to appear together.
Yeah. So here we have a frequency count of all those words. If we look at a given text, that has to be a certain size, but if you look at a given text, you will find that the is the most frequent word, and it can be, I looked at dissertations, doctoral dissertations. Of is the second most frequent and goes on like that. But I've also looked at smaller corpora, and the same pattern exists. So from a small corpus to a very large corpus, you still see the same frequency of these words appearing in the texts. Does that help?
Yeah, you mentioned
it's not
this example,
it's not perfect. It's not
in
perfect.
the article too.
Yeah, so it's a fractal in the sense that some words are heavily weighted and occupy a great deal of the text, and they do that same occupying of texts of different sizes. So that's what I meant by very small to much larger. The will always be the top contender. Do you see how that's a fractal? Go ahead.
I really want to ask this question because so in this paper you use the phrase complex nonlinear system 24 times, but complex dynamic system only twice. But in your later book, the 2008 book, now the complex dynamic system, they appeared 59 times, while complex nonlinear system, they occurred 0 times. So it seems to me that there's a shift of focus from nonlinear to dynamic. Does that, is there also a shift of focus?
There's also the term complex adaptive systems. That's another variation. I think it has more to do with what you're emphasizing, frankly. I mean, the system continues to be nonlinear, whether we put that in the middle or not. And that's a good observation. But I think it has to do with what you're emphasizing. Also, to be honest, as I continue to explore this theory, my
Mm-hmm.
understanding changes, of course, right?
Mm.
So, for example, in 2017, what would that be? 20 years after the publication of this article, I have
Mm-hmm.
a chapter in a book that is something to the effect of the complexity theory, or let's say complexity theory, the lessons continue, I called it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's, as you can see, and you've done a wonderful job of distilling a great deal of my words and other words into a coherent set of features. But there's a lot to it, and it's a new way of thinking. It takes a lot to get
Mm-hmm.
your mind around. So so if the change in the nomenclature, if it's changed in the nomenclature, I think it has to do with what you're emphasizing, but also in your current level of understanding, because that
Yes, yes,
evolves
quite
as
true.
well
Mm.
as we learn.
Okay, so it's close to 10 p.m. here now, and at your place it's 10 a.m. in the morning. And
Yes.
please join me in thanking Professor Larsen-Freeman for her time and for her wonderful discussion on this very complex topic. And Professor Larsen-Freeman, thank you again for joining with us. I hope we could.
I salute your courage in tackling this one. It's not easy. And
Yes,
all I can say is, I hope, I can't promise, but I hope you'll become as fascinated with it as I do.
well,
And all
I
you have
already
to do,
am. I
I know
already
you
am.
are. I know you are, but I'm talking about all the live streamers right now. See, I never use live streamer. That's a
I
linguistic
make sure many of them become fascinated about this topic too.
neology, but that's a new neology. I've never heard of live streamer. I just created it. It's a new form, a neology into the language, because it's always changing. Thank you very much for your attention, for your
Thank you.
interest.
We hope to see you again in our live stream soon. And enjoy your lunch. I know you have a tight schedule,
Breakfast. It's
so
breakfast time here.
also enjoy our breakfast. Enjoy
Or
your
brunch.
Okay.
Brunch is another example, right? A
Mm-hmm.
neologism. So I will do that, and then I have another appointment. So
Mm-hmm.
have a great Sunday, rest of the
You too.
weekend.
You too.
And thank you for your courage in tackling this and for your interest.
Okay.
I'm
Thank you
very
for this
impressed.
article.
I'm very impressed.
And thank you for the signature too.
Well, the reason it's so big is I have a long name. It's not because I'm so, what's the word, self-centered. It's just that my name is long, right?
But it's good. It's good. Okay.
You're
See
welcome.
you, Professor Larsen-Freeman.
Okay. Thank
And
you for
enjoy
setting
your
this up.
brunch.
Yep.
And
My
see
appointments.
you everybody else. And let's call it at night.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.